So touching grass literally changed my life. And I don't mean like actually touching grass. That's just like an online metaphor for people who play too many video games and need to go outside. Which is kind of me, I guess. I spent a big part of my career working in video games and technology and social media. So I've spent a lot of my life behind screens and on the internet, and I guess inside to an extent. Well, I don't think I was ever that bad. My preferred hobbies did tend to be indoors behind a screen. But like a lot of people, when the pandemic hit and all of a sudden there was no food available, that was definitely a big shock. I think it made a lot of people question the reliability of their food resources and how they could kind of manage that themselves. Around this time as well, I was feeling pretty burnt out with my career. I was very fortunate to, I guess, blow up in 2020, but along with that came increased pressures and workload, and my time and mind was just 100% dedicated to my work. Because I was feeling burnt out, I was exploring ways to kind of manage that with one of my favorite resources, self-help books. And one of the books I found was one called Ikigai, which is about the Japanese people of Okinawa and how they live long, happy lives. And it's all about kind of like their food and diet and lifestyle and blah, blah, blah. But one of the big aspects that I really took away from it was that a lot of them were gardeners and they love gardening, and they feel like that was kind of a big part of their happiness in life. And I'm like, you know what? I could do with some more happiness. So along with being burnt out and wanting more control over the food I was eating, I got into gardening. At first, I didn't really know what I was doing. My yard was pretty kind of overgrown, had a lot of weeds, so I spent a lot of time kind of cutting all of that back. And then I bought a couple of garden beds and kind of plonked them down, added some soil and some mulch. And I think the first plant I started planting was tomatoes and maybe some like kale or something. And I found it so rewarding and just so good for my mental health. I had no idea that gardening could have this impact on me, and it was a time that it was desperately, desperately needed. I think building the habit of going outside every day, watering my plants and just checking on them and seeing them grow created a lot of reward. I think online and with the state of the world, there's so much we can't control sometimes. So to have something outside that you can kind of nurture and care for and kind of reap the rewards of that was just such a joy for me. And because I was enjoying it so much, I of course became addicted and then bought more and more garden beds and kind of started plonking them down and planting all sorts of things. I think I planted a variety of food over the years, like pumpkins, potatoes, garlic, all different sorts of like flowers. And one thing I've learned from gardening is that there's so much to learn. I find it just so fascinating, and I'm always just in awe of nature and just how amazing it is that it is able to produce all these different foods that we can eat. And I think over time we've become so disconnected from where our food comes from. I'm really grateful for gardening because I think it's really taught me to slow down. It's taught me to have hobbies and interests outside of my career and outside of the internet, because I very much love my career, but sometimes I think it's easy to get obsessed and overwhelmed with it because you love it, so you think about it all the time, and that's not always a good thing, because your mind doesn't get a break, you're just constantly stressing about stuff. So gardening was definitely that reprieve for me where I could disconnect and get out of nature and focus on goals that are healthy and good for me, and while also feeding myself. I remember there was a point where I just grew a cauliflower, and the cauliflower took quite a while to grow, and I remember harvesting it and just having a complete moment of like, oh my god, I grew this. I did this with my bare hands, and I just felt a moment of such pride, and I've never experienced anything like that really. I've been so fortunate to have so many experiences and opportunities in my career, but growing vegetables I've never felt anything like that pride. I think when you can do that yourself and control that, it kind of unlocks like this natural aspect of just being an animal on this planet. I'm just really excited that I've discovered the joy of gardening because I've become completely obsessed. But you may be thinking, wow, Nay, you're really passionate about gardening. Your garden must look amazing now, right? Well, 12 months, life has been a little bit hectic. Last year I got to do a lot of travel and there was a lot of stuff going on with like the Quest 3 launch and everything, so I was quite busy with work. So I kind of let my garden go. And by letting it go, I let the weeds take over, and I let the chickens get in there and mess it up, and I let the spiders take over. There's probably even some snakes in there, I don't know. But I did this in mind knowing that I wanted to do a complete garden makeover. When I got into gardening, I didn't really know what I was doing, so I was just plonking beds down and not really prepping them the right way or planning them out the correct way. So now I've learned kind of so much more about gardening. I know all the mistakes I did wrong, and I'm currently in the process of doing a big overhaul so I can fix those mistakes and kind of do bigger and better things in my garden. So what's the plan? Do you like gardening? He likes to eat the chicken poop. So for starters, my house is on a suburban block, but it's a pretty largish suburban block, so luckily I do have a fair amount of room for growing vegetables, which is very exciting. But I do live in a coastal area, so a lot of the ground is sand, which isn't good for growing vegetables. So over time, I've been trying to build up the soil, but this is an ongoing process. And recently I've discovered the soil's doing all right. Like, there's quite a lot of worms in the soil, but there is some areas that is still quite sandy. I've been working on building up that soil as well. I'm also in a subtropical climate, which means it's pretty much sunny all year round, which means I can grow food all year round, which is really advantageous. It doesn't snow here, there's no frost, so I don't need to worry about having off seasons for growing. And being subtropical, I can also grow lots of tropical fruit and veggies. So one of my biggest mistakes? My biggest mistakes were probably not planning out the garden beds properly. I kind of just shoved them all up against each other and didn't manage the weeds correctly. So weeds were constantly growing up between the beds and like under them, which drove me insane. I think in my yard, I have a lot of that like really runner grass, and it gets everywhere. And I never knew how invasive it was. So I was just like, it'll be fine, I'll leave it. But it's something I definitely should have got on top of earlier, and I'm regretting it now. So with redoing my garden beds, that's a big priority to me. Making sure I'm killing off all those weeds and grass before adding new garden beds, because I'm not dealing with that every season. It's too much. I know I'm gonna have to, but I hate it. One of the other big mistakes I've made, which is more of kind of a moral decision, is that I regret using plastic in my garden. I think originally I used like the plastic weed matting, which a lot of people do. And over time, I've started to learn more about plastics and microplastics, and to be honest, absolutely terrifies me. That stuff does just not break down. It lasts forever. So if you're putting that in your garden, it's there forever. And it also affects things like microorganisms and worms, and I just don't want that. I don't want that. So I'm in the process of removing all the weed matting and also other bits of plastics where I was not careful, like vegetable labels. And because I originally used cardboard to kind of suffocate the weeds, I was not careful getting rid of the sticky tape. So I was just constantly finding bits of sticky tape. I majorly regret it. I did not take my time in the beginning. I am mortified by the amount of plastic I've been finding in my garden. Again, this is like just a moral thing, but one of my big goals with the garden is that I really, really want to reduce the amount of plastic that's in my garden and try and opt for more organic resources. Another mistake I made is not watering it enough. I think in theory I was like, oh, water it every day, it'll be good for me to get outdoors, but I think we all know that doesn't happen. My camera's fallen. So with the plan for the new garden, I've kind of been dabbling in whether I do irrigation or not. Irrigation's like a whole thing, so I need to do a lot of research, but that's the plan. So the strategy. I've got a few principles I want to follow with this garden, and one of them is to reuse or recycle as much as possible. I love thrift shopping, and I think these days there's just so much waste. And I think if there's ways to repurpose things so we can reduce the cost of gardening, I think that's great. It's better for the planet, better for the bank account, and better for nature as well if it's all organic materials that will break down over time. So that's one of the principles I want to follow for my garden. The second one is use manual labor as much as possible, as in my own manual labor. Again, I want to try and really reduce the cost of my garden makeover as much as possible, so that means doing everything myself where I can. So I've been shoveling mulch day in, day out, all by myself. And to be honest, I really love the manual labor. It's like a gym workout. It's more rewarding because I know I did that. The garden is completely made by me, and I think that's really rewarding. My other strategy for this garden is that I don't want it to be any ordinary garden. I almost want it to be like a piece of art, which means I want my garden to be the most colorful, obnoxious garden anyone has ever seen. So that means I'll be adding a lot of color in my garden, not just through plants, also through different projects. And I definitely want people to walk in my garden and be like, whoa. Whether they love it or hate it, I don't care. I want a reaction. So that's one of the plans for my garden, is just make it colorful, make a statement. And I think that really excites me. And I'm also very excited about sharing these projects and this journey, because I'm really excited. Even though it's gonna be colorful though, it still needs to function as a kitchen garden. My big goal is to one day be self-sufficient, that I don't need to go to the grocery store to buy my vegetables. And beyond that, I'd love to also provide vegetables for my friends and family and even community, whether that be through preserved items or soaps and stuff like that. I would really love to explore that, but that's later down the track. But I think it's a fun goal to have. Where am I currently? Well, I've been trying to do a big clean out of my garden. I had a bunch of trees along the fence line that were causing a lot of problems. Sadly, I got a bunch of trees cut down, but I have so much more room for activities now. So I'm planning to plant a lot of fruit trees along the fence line, but that soil there is very sandy. So I'm gonna have to do a lot of work to build up that soil. So I have reused the mulch from the plants I cut down to lay over that area. So hopefully in time I'm gonna improve the soil, but it's gonna take time. The other part of the plan is new raised garden beds, but this time planning it out a little bit more organized and neater, and making sure I'm really getting on top of that weed problem. My goal is to have no grass. I don't want grass. So that's a project I'll be sharing on this channel. The other plan of the garden is to really encourage wildlife. So whether it be bees, insects, frogs, possums. I've got a local resident possum. So I've got a few projects planned for encouraging those animals as well that I'm very excited about. Also the bird life, got to encourage the bird life. I also have 3 chickens and they're in desperate need of a new chicken coop. So I'd really love to build them a new chicken coop. I have absolutely no building experience, but I really want to tackle that challenge. And again, I'd love to share that project on this channel. And one of my ultimate project dream goals is to turn my pool into a pond. Now, I've already done a lot of research in this and it's not gonna be easy. So that's the ultimate goal. So that's kind of a big overview of my garden and of my plans and my dreams, because I have a lot of bold dreams sometimes that I get very excited about. I'm really excited about this channel, to be sharing those projects, and I think they'll be very fun. And I love gardening, and I really wanna share that with you guys. And I'd love to make like gardening cool. That sounds lame, but I'd love to just show that gardening can be really fun, and encourage more people to get out there and get gardening, because it's been a big game changer for me, and I love sharing what I'm passionate about. So that really encourages me to make videos about my gardening adventures, and hopefully you guys enjoy them. Make sure to subscribe to keep up to date with my gardening adventures. The next project is probably going to be painting a mural on my shed. So keep an eye out for that one. But thanks so much for watching, and I can't wait to share my gardening adventures with you. Bye!